Welcome to Chicago Style Parenting, where we delve into parenting life in Chicago and uncover the resources, information, and support that Chicago family needs.
That's right. We are brand new to the podcast scene, but have been around for over 40 years, helping Chicago parents navigate all there is to raising kiddos in the Windy City.
We're especially thrilled to speak with today's guest as we discuss a topic that we know parents have a lot of questions about: how to navigate Chicago public schools.
Yes, Chicago is the fourth largest school district in the country and also one of the most complex.
It definitely is. Listeners, if you want to understand your elementary school options in Chicago public schools, you're sure to learn a lot today and enjoys today's episode with our guest speaker, Grace Lee Sawin, co-founder of Chicago School GPS. As a self-described Tiger Mom Light, Grace has always felt that the most important role of a parent is to provide the best possible education for her children by putting in all the time and research required to successfully make that happen. Little did she know how much time and research she would have to do. She firmly believes a great education is a right, not a privilege. It just so happens that in the city of Chicago, it's a right that takes an inordinate amount of research. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you so much, Amy and Satara. I love MPN family, so it's such a pleasure to be here.
We're so happy to have you.
Let's go ahead and get started and jump right in.
All right. Grace, you and I have worked together for several years now, and I know that our CPS presentations can last 90 minutes or more, especially when we're adding in time for parent questions. There's just so much to cover.
There's a lot. That's why I got into this, is just it seems very complicated because it is, but at the same time once you figure out the system, you can definitely calmly navigate it.
Good to know.
That must be the inspiration behind Chicago GPS, navigating it all, right?
Yes, I definitely started Chicago School GPS because of the fact that I'm not from Chicago. My kids are a little older now, but way back when I started Chi School GPS, it was a system that certainly, we didn't have any need, desire, want to move outside of the city, but there was so much about the city that we didn't understand in terms of schools. My kids are definitely older, so that back then, even the CPS, system was less choice-wise, much more opaque than it is now. I actually love how CPS has evolved with the GoCPS portal. That is extremely helpful. And so in time, I kind of helped my playgroup actually navigate the system since my older one had gone through it. And from there, it evolved to helping others really understand that it seems inscrutable, but with a little knowledge and some navigating help, that it is something that actually Chicago has wonderful options for school, public and private. Certainly the public system is much more confusing, but there's a lot of choice out there. So that's the beauty of Chicago and CPS. And so I just love to share that with families and help them feel more confident, because in the end, yes, there's many different pathways to come at the same outcome. And so I really enjoy doing that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for creating this resource that is incredibly helpful to parents all throughout the city. You touched on this a little bit, but there are so many different types of public elementary schools in Chicago. Can you give us a quick summary of all of the different types of elementary schools?
Sure. So in elementary for CPS, one has an assigned neighborhood school based on the address that your primary residence is at. But one never has to actually attend their neighborhood school because Chicago's system is called an open enrollment school system, which means that if a family has a foresight of about a year ahead of time, so kindergarten through 8th grade is the elementary system in Chicago. So, I usually say and 5 by September 1st is the start for kindergarten. So if a family has a 4-year-old by September 1st, they can definitely go into a process through this application called GoCPS to also look at other types of elementary schools and possibly apply to them. So there are, a neighborhood school, sometimes called a magnet cluster, with the word cluster meaning that it is a neighborhood boundaried school. So there's magnet schools without the word cluster that don't have a neighborhood boundary. And then there are selective enrollment programs, and those are test-based programs. Classical and regional gifted centers are, really K through 8th grade for the most part. 2 of them start in 1st grade, Keller and Beaubien. And then there are academic centers, which are part of the elementary sphere, that are test-based middle school programs that are housed in high schools. And so students in 7th grade are actually getting 9th grade level work. So really between, your neighborhood school to specialty programs like magnet and selective enrollment to being able to attend a school that's not your neighborhood school called an open enrollment school, there's a lot of choices in Chicago.
Okay, to clarify, the magnet cluster school is typically in a neighborhood school and has a neighborhood boundary. Is that right?
The word cluster is just another way to say that there's a boundary. So a magnet cluster school is, honestly, it's a neighborhood school. The term magnet in front of that just means that there's some funding from CPS for, let's say, world languages. Burr is a world language magnet cluster school with Japanese as the language. Pulaski is a magnet cluster IB school, so it has international baccalaureate that is funded through CPS, but Pulaski is a neighborhood school. Pulaski also has, I didn't mention, but there are 3 English language learner selective enrollment schools. So Pulaski has a Spanish, English language learner test-based model, and Greeley and Orozco are the other 2. But those are for students who are testing in another language to get into selective enrollment.
Okay, that's great. And a magnet school does not have a neighborhood boundary. That's a lottery system. So
Yes.
It's not a test-in system, but you can apply to the lottery and then you may or may not get picked basically on luck.
Luck or so, like, for instance, a magnet school is citywide, right? Anybody who is interested in this particular focus area. One example is there are 2 Montessori magnet schools. Montessori is a philosophy that worldwide you will see a lot of Montessoris with the same materials, the pink tower, the brown stairs, the sandpaper letters. If CPS is going to be hosting or have some Montessori programs as part of its system, then it needs to put funding in to provide those materials. And so now these are, Drummond is in Wicker Park, Suter is north of United Center. If the philosophy is not of interest to a family, they're not even going to apply to it. But all over the city, you're welcome to apply to it if Montessori is what you'd like for your child to have as their educational pedagogy. So that being said, there's no boundary. There is a lottery system, no test, but they do want, because there's no academic criteria to get into this magnet school, like a Drummond or a Hawthorne or whatnot. The first criteria that the magnet schools like to pull students into is keeping families together, and that means siblings are guaranteed, or the first round of students that they pull in. After that, there is a little bit of consideration because it's a citywide program that doesn't have necessarily a neighborhood boundary, but they do want to not have people travel all over the city. So they give what's considered a proximity lottery of about 1.5 miles. If you are the incoming year for this particular program, they will say after all siblings are taken, who are coming in, then CPS would like to offer about 40% of the remaining seats over to families who are within a mile and a half, which is kind of considered walkable in CPS parlance. And then after that, there is this desire to try and have a level of diversity reflected in these programs, these magnet lottery programs. So every address has an assigned socioeconomic tier. And so the very last bucket of seating students in a magnet program with no boundary, it should reflect the diversity of the city, is that they will defer to the 4 socioeconomic tiers. Tier 4 is high socioeconomics, tier 1 is low socioeconomics, and whatever is left over after siblings and then, people within a mile and a half, like 40% of the leftover number, whatever is the remaining seats are equally divided by the 4 tiers. But in some cases, if there are a lot of siblings or, it just happens to be a year that there's not a lot of leftover space in that third bucket, it may just be 1 or 2 students from tier 1 or tier 2, tier 3. It may not be a lot of overall diversity. In a magnet school, it kind of somewhat reflects the neighborhood a little bit that it's housed in.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't think we're going to have time to get into the details about the tiers that we might have time to get into in a longer conversation, but I know that parents are going to have questions about that. So, what is the resource that parents should use to go find out about the tiers? Where can they find their tier and learn more about it?
So CPS, as I mentioned earlier, GoCPS is a great resource. Go.cps.edu is the repository that CPS has put together to have a lot of resources for family to learn. There's tabs on there for elementary, high school, preschool. For elementary, there are sub-tabs like ES, elementary school resources. There's, one of those documents has something about CPS tiers, but to find your tier, you can go into the school search tab and type in your address. And then once you hit, the search little magnifying glass, it will pop up and it will tell you currently what your CPS tier is. They can change year to year, typically in the fall. But it is something that will call up what your tier is. It will tell you that based on the time that you were searching.
Okay. Thank you. So with all of these different types of schools, what do you see as benefits, or what do you hear parents saying are the benefits of the various types of schools? Like, why do families like their neighborhood school, or why do families like a magnet school, selective enrollment school? What are you finding?
Yeah, well, so one thing, and this is actually a topic of conversation because, obviously with the mayor and, their agendas for the school, really great school systems, pull up the cities and whatnot. And so there was a more recent talk about resources, which are finite, but resources being directed a little bit more towards the neighborhood schools, as opposed to, there's slightly different funding buckets, obviously, to make programs possible. When you have a World Language Academy that's a magnet school that has 4 languages, you're hiring 4 language teachers to have students, learn that language from kindergarten to 8th grade. Neighborhood schools actually do have one great advantage is that it's very close by. The whole family can go there automatically, no application, no trying to, have a year ahead. But neighborhood schools also have some special perks in the fact that IB, International Baccalaureate, are all in neighborhood schools, hosted by neighborhood schools. It's a philosophy that is internationally known and recognized of more of a global perspective for learning and very interdisciplinary. CPS is a very robust IB adopter early on. And so there are quite a few high schools, 22 high schools that have IB, but IB also goes down to the kindergarten level, and there's quite a few of those. CPS also has invested a lot, and families really do like this dual language push. So neighborhood schools are the hosts for those dual languages programs. And so that is something that families will choose a neighborhood school for keeping the family together, not having to worry about testing, not having to travel across town, and also these specialty programs. Magnet schools, as I said before, if Montessori is a philosophy that you really like, or world languages that you really want to have, your child exposed to for 4 years, for 8 years, 9 years, actually, kindergarten through 8th grade, then those are, that's why you would choose it. These schools are still teaching math, reading, science, and social studies, but kind of their whatever their overlay is for their focus area, or a little bit extra funding here and there, it will permeate the culture and climate of the school. So there's that. And then testing is just, families do say, okay, well, my child, I think is quite brilliant. Everybody's child is absolutely brilliant. But maybe this is an environment that they can get pushed a little bit more. I just do caution parents in saying that not all, for one, CPS, in the first glance, people think all the schools have the same curriculum, all the schools have the same, novels and math curriculum and reading, etc. No, CPS, think of it as just administrative arm, but each school, whether it's, neighborhood school, magnet cluster, classical or regional gifted center, they all have their own culture and climate. They all have their own, flavor, but they do have the commonality of they do have CPS as the administrative arm, and also maybe, there are standardized testing requirements, but much individualism, including small schools, large schools, schools that are in brand new facilities, schools that, have longevity over 100 years. So there's just so much richness, honestly, in the Chicago public school system. And everybody's best, or everybody's, concerns are very personal.
Yeah, I think you actually moved right into the next question and answered it a little bit for us. But when it comes to finding that best fit for our kids, it's really less about finding the best school, like the top ranked school, but really more about finding a school that's going to really work well for our family. So like, for example, we definitely looked at a neighborhood school because I wanted the flexibility of walking, Cam at that time to school every day. So having to think about commuting to another school was not going to work for our entire family. So a perfect school for one family might have a lot of drawbacks for another family. What are some examples that keep parents from accepting a seat that might draw them into going to another school instead?
So the big thing about selective enrollment is that every student needs to test in themselves. There's no sibling preference. There's no I know twins or triplets or whatever. One tests in, the others don't. So families are presented with, well, one child is in this program, the other one's not. Meanwhile, these programs are not just because your child has tested in, doesn't mean that these are the only programs that will challenge your child, or these are the only programs that, that will offer what the families think, which is curriculum that keeps up and keeps them engaged, etc. There are absolutely, that is happening in neighborhood schools, in magnet programs, etc. It's not just happening at selective enrollment. The only thing with selective enrollment is that a child has to actually physically go and take a test. And then there's a finite number of seats in each of these programs. Most of them are only one classroom per grade, and 28 kids, K through 3rd grade, maybe 31 kids, 4th through 8th grade. But there are some of these programs that are in standalone schools, meaning like a Leonard and an Edison and a Decatur. That's the only thing in those walls. Other schools like a Pritzker and a Bell and a McPherson have one classroom of the test-in program, and then the rest of the school is neighborhood. So you find some families with multiple children, maybe moving to those programs after one child gets in. They have 2 more in the wings. They don't want to split up and have this nightmare commute. So, and realize that, wow, the neighborhood program actually is quite a good fit for the students. And so,
Yeah, that makes sense. That getting siblings into the same school can be a lifesaver for parents, and
Absolutely.
it can be a deal breaker, I
Yes.
guess is a better way to say it. And then some families manage it with 3 kids in 3 different schools, and they do just fine. So it's just so personalized.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know that helping parents navigate the Chicago public school system has been a priority of NPN for almost 45 years. It's a constant topic on our discussion forum. And with so many new families entering the system each year, we see a lot of the same questions on our discussion forum every year, which is great because parents who have been through CPS 1, 2, 3, or more times have a lot of personal experience to share. But every year there are new questions. Things change in CPS, or there's a hot school or a hot topic that suddenly everyone is talking about. So I was wondering, have you been hearing any new questions from parents this year? Are there new challenges that they're facing or new interest in any aspect of CPS?
Wow, Amy. This year is a very, very hot topic year because of the fact that for the first time, CPS is having families rank their 20 up to 20 choice programs. Choice programs are programs that don't require the separate test. So they're magnet schools, a neighborhood school that's not your own, magnet cluster, open enrollment, whatever the term you're going to use. These are, in the past, families could just put 20 down. They could get multiple offers simultaneously. And so maybe, I would help families, maybe they've toured 6. I would say, okay, what did you like about these 6? And then we would talk about maybe some other ones they haven't toured yet that they could put down on their list, and somewhat similar feel and vibe, and certainly tour to confirm. Now they can still put down other schools they haven't toured yet. That's fine. It's just that they have to rank them. So 20 schools is a lot of schools, right? Before it was easier to just kind of throw down 20 because knowing that all right, I can decide later, do I really want that? But now the requirement of ranking, which CPS, we were recording this before actually the applications open. But once they open, I expect CPS to give a little more details about when the ranking needs to happen. And, does that mean that there's only one offer? This is what has happened for the preschool and for the high school CPS applications, is there's one offer. You do rank your choices. So this was the last vestige of the multiple offer perk that was going on, and now it has changed. So this year, it's yet to be revealed, even the details, but it has been announced that families are going to need to rank their 20. I don't foresee that as a huge, I don't know. I know parents are very, very, very nervous about that. But at the same time, I think they should still consider more than just 1 or 2 or 3 schools. They should definitely consider maybe even almost up to 20, but certainly now there used to be in your head when you put any schools down, there were some reasons why, right? And so now it's just, you're going to have to make that a little bit more salient about what those reasons are. And a lot of times it's what we talked about earlier, proximity, getting your kids to those schools. The test-based ones, the selective enrollments, are their own. For many years now, they've always been ranked. So this is only for those non-test-based lottery programs that a family could put down 20, but now they have to rank their 20.
I think that requires more work from parents on the front end, but it should be so much easier to manage those offers of acceptance afterwards.
Another reason why they're doing this is because with the old system of multiple offers, some families could have, just by luck of draw or whatever, gotten 4 or 5 offers in one fell swoop. Other families may have had no offers. In my 13 years of helping families at Chicago School GPS, I've never had a family never get an offer by the end of the summer when school starts if they put down about 20. But some of them, didn't hear until very late into the summer. Yeah. Others had an embarrassment of riches. So it should, and this is why high school switched over to this 4 or 5 years ago. And it was because there were some high school students who were sitting on multiple offers and other high school students who had nothing. And it was heartbreaking. So the intent is to make sure that, yes, if people are ranking them, that there will be more of a parity on, everybody will get something out of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And those families who had multiple offers, while they were deciding, they were really holding spaces that were going to open up. So other families couldn't get a space until July or August or whenever that deadline was, while a family was taking their time to decide. And they had that freedom to do it, but it really causes a lot of stress in the wait list process.
For those other families. Yeah, I do think that this will create more opportunity for families to have a variety of options and not necessarily have to hold on or hold out or wait to hear from a school that a seat was available. Like you mentioned, Amy, right around the time where everyone should be preparing to go back to school and know where they're going to be sending their kid.
Yeah.
So besides all of the resources that you mentioned and the resources that we offer on npnparents.org, where else can parents go to find more information about the CPS application and admissions process? And we'll also be sure, listeners, to share these links in our show notes so that you have easy access to them.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, go.cps.edu is straight from the horse's mouth. It's straight from CPS. That's where I go to verify things. So, granted, you have to know, because I go there so often, I know oh, this is outdated, or so right now, literally, if you were to go there before the applications have not yet opened, you will see a lot of outdated information and it'll be very confusing to families. So, but they will be updating. They actually constantly update. So even midstream, after the application has opened, if they make an announcement, etc., they make a change, it's at go.cps.edu. And so there's a lot of resources there for things like the, ranking last year's cutoff scores, which change every year, but you get an idea of okay, the criteria that was used, or there's a rubric for the selective enrollment. There's things people ask about, well, what's on the test. So we, Chicago School GPS, we also have a lot of resources for that too that happen throughout the year. So if you go to our website, chischoolgps.com, you can kind of see what we're monitoring and what we're offering. And then NPN is a fabulous, absolutely, the discussion forum is a rich place to really get not only your current questions answered, but also past families who have had that same concern. And then you can find out there's ChicagoSchoolOptions.com is another little forum that's not as powerful as NPN, but there's just places out there for sure. And then for families, when you're visiting schools, talk to other parents who are doing that, who are conducting the tours, etc. Tours are really the best way that I say for a family to get that culture, that vibe, that feel of a school, as opposed to a ranking or anything like that. Any outside source like that is not as reliable.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me from what you said earlier is that CPS is really the one that's kind of holding it together as the administrator, and then every school has its own climate and culture that you can really kind of feel and get a connection with on those tours at those schools and school visits. So I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Grace.
It's my pleasure.
Listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Tell us what you'd like to hear about and who you'd like to hear from by clicking the link in our show notes. Hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop, and we'll see you around the neighborhood.